Imagine standing on the green hills of Britain over 1,500 years ago. The morning mist curls gently over winding rivers, drifting through the valleys like breath from the earth itself. The forests stretch endlessly to the horizon, vast, silent, and ancient. In the distance, smoke rises from small clusters of huts, the faint signs of human life scattered across a wild and untamed land. The air is thick with the scent of damp soil, pine, and hearth smoke. It is a beautiful but lonely landscape, a land in transition. This was not yet England. It was Britain, a place between worlds. The once mighty Roman Empire, which had ruled these lands for nearly 4 centuries, was now a memory fading into the fog. The grand Roman roads that once connected towns and forts were cracked and overgrown. The towering stone walls of cities like Londinium still stood, but they were silent, their markets empty, their streets echoing with the ghosts of empire. The legions, the disciplined soldiers of Rome, had marched away in the early 5th century, summoned home to defend a crumbling empire under attack. They left behind a people uncertain of their future. The Britons, descendants of the ancient Celtic tribes. For generations, they had lived under Roman order, protected by Roman swords, taxed by Roman governors, and guided by Roman law. But now, with the empire gone, that order had vanished. Without Rome, Britain became a place of fear and opportunity. Rival Celtic kings fought each other for land and power. Old tribal rivalries reawakened. The roads that had once carried Roman patrols were now paths for raiders and bandits. The once protected island had become vulnerable. And across the cold, restless waters of the North Sea, other eyes were watching. From the shores of what we now call Denmark, Germany, and Northern Europe, 3 mighty warrior peoples looked westward. They were known as the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes, tribes of fierce fighters and expert sailors, hardened by the harsh winds and cold seas of their homelands. They had heard tales of Britain, a land of rich soil, empty cities, and undefended coasts. To them, it sounded like a promised land. At first, their arrival was small, just a few ships landing on quiet beaches. According to later legends, 2 brothers, Hengist and Horsa, were among the first to come. The story tells that a desperate British king named Vortigern invited them to help defend his kingdom from attacks by northern raiders, the Picts and Scots. The brothers brought their warriors, fought bravely, and drove the enemy back. But soon their loyalty began to waver. They saw the weakness of the Britons, the richness of the land, and the possibilities it offered. More ships followed. What began as mercenaries became settlers. What began as allies became conquerors. The newcomers arrived in waves, bringing with them their families, livestock, weapons, and gods. Their long wooden ships, carved with animal heads, cut through the mist and landed on Britain's eastern shores. Villages were burned, fields taken, and the Britons pushed ever westward, toward the rough hills of Wales, Cornwall, and the north. But these warriors did not come only to destroy. They came to stay. They built homes, farms, and strongholds. They brought with them their own beliefs, worshipping powerful gods like Woden, Thunor, and Tu, and holding feasts in great wooden halls. Their songs told of battle, loyalty, and fate. Their lives revolved around courage and kinship. Over time, their influence spread. They carved out territories that would later become known as kingdoms, the lands of the Saxons in the south, the Angles in the east and north, and the Jutes in the southeast. The names of these new realms echoed their origins. Wessex, the land of the West Saxons; Sussex, the South Saxons; Essex, the East Saxons; and East Anglia, the land of the Angles. From these beginnings, a new culture began to take root, one that blended old Celtic traditions with the fierce independence of the newcomers. The language of the Britons slowly gave way to the tongue of the settlers, an early form of Old English. Their customs, their laws, and their faiths began to shape the land itself. And though the transformation was slow and often bloody, it was also creative. The warriors who had once come as raiders became farmers, rulers, and builders. The ruins of Roman Britain were given new life as Anglo-Saxon halls rose beside ancient stone walls. In time, the land that had once been a Roman province became something entirely new, a patchwork of Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, each vying for power, but together forming the roots of a nation that would endure. From the clash of swords and the courage of settlers, from the ashes of the Roman world and the ambition of warrior tribes, something remarkable was born. A new identity, a new culture, a new name: England, the land of the Angles. And so, out of mist and blood, ruin and renewal, began the story of a people who would shape the future of a nation and, one day, the world. But history, like the tides, never rests. Even as the Anglo-Saxons carved their kingdoms into the land, a new challenge was already forming beyond the sea, one that would test their courage and their unity like never before. For out of the cold north, across storm-dark waters, came another wave of warriors, the Vikings. They came in sleek longships, their sails striped red and white, their prows carved with dragons' heads that cut through the mist like blades. At first, they came to raid. Monasteries along the coast, peaceful places of prayer and learning, were plundered and burned. Monks fled through smoke and flame, clutching holy books as the invaders took silver, gold, and slaves. But soon, the raids turned to conquest. By the 9th century, the Vikings weren't just attackers, they were settlers. The Danelaw, the Viking-controlled part of England, stretched across the north and east. The once proud Anglo-Saxon kingdoms were falling one by one. And yet, out of this chaos, a leader rose, a king who would earn the name Alfred the Great. Alfred of Wessex was no ordinary ruler. He was a scholar as well as a warrior, a man who believed that knowledge could be as powerful as the sword. When the Vikings invaded his kingdom, Alfred refused to surrender. He reorganized his armies, built fortified towns called burhs, and trained his people to resist invasion. In the marshes of Somerset, Alfred gathered his men, farmers, smiths, and warriors, and struck back. His victory at the Battle of Edington turned the tide. The Viking leader Guthrum was defeated and baptized as part of a peace agreement. For the first time, the English people began to see themselves as one, not just Saxons, Angles, or Jutes, but a single nation defending its home. Alfred's rule brought more than survival. He championed education, translating important works into English so that common people could learn. He reformed laws, promoted justice, and laid down the first stones of a unified England. And though he never saw full unity in his lifetime, his vision became the foundation for everything that followed. After Alfred's death, his successors carried on his dream. His grandson, King Ethelstan, would finally achieve what none before him had: the unification of all Anglo-Saxon kingdoms under one crown. In 937 AD, Aethelstan faced the greatest challenge to his rule at the Battle of Brunanburh, where an alliance of Scots, Vikings, and Britons sought to tear his kingdom apart. The battle was fierce and bloody, but Aethelstan's forces triumphed. Chroniclers later wrote that no greater battle had ever been fought on English soil. From that day forward, England was no longer a collection of warring tribes. It was one land, Angloland, the land of the English. The dream Alfred began in the swamps of Wessex had become real. As peace slowly took root, England blossomed. The Christian faith spread across the land, and great monasteries became centers of learning and art once again. Stone churches rose from the earth, their bells ringing over fields where once swords had clashed. Anglo-Saxon art flourished, intricate jewelry of gold and garnet, elegant illuminated manuscripts, and carved stone crosses that told stories of faith and courage. The English language, born from the words of those early warrior tribes, grew richer and more poetic. But beneath the peace, destiny stirred. The Viking threat never fully vanished, and the shadow of new invaders would one day fall again. The Normans from across the Channel. Yet, even their conquest could not erase what had been built. The Anglo-Saxon spirit of courage, endurance, and creativity remained the beating heart of England. From raiders to rulers, from scattered tribes to a kingdom, the journey of the Anglo-Saxons was one of struggle and transformation. They shaped not only the land, but the very identity of its people, their language, their laws, and their sense of who they were. The green hills, the ancient churches, the very names on the map, all whisper their story. Wessex, Sussex, Essex, Kent, Northumbria, echoes of those first kingdoms that gave birth to a nation. And so, when we speak of England today, we speak of a dream that began in fire and faith, forged by warrior hands and guided by visionaries who saw beyond the sword. From the ashes of the Roman world, through the courage of the Saxon age, rose a people who would one day shape the destiny of the world.